A stunning discovery is what they're calling it, one that could help scientists know for sure whether life ever formed on Mars, or even exists today. The study, led by Italian researchers, says they've found what could be an underground lake. It's a large body of liquid water, 20 kilometres wide and 1.5 kilometres below the surface.
Have a mystery on their hands. Signals from outer space are being detected. But what's causing the unusual sounds, and where exactly are they coming from? TV 1055's Vanessa Murdoch has more.
In a galaxy far, far away, we're talking 500 million light years away, something big is happening, and scientists on Earth can detect it.
You sort of think about E.T. and stuff like that.
I can't think of a mystery that we've had this enticing in a long time.
Tim Paglione, a professor of physics and astronomy at CUNY York College, confirms a recent journal article that hones in on fast radio bursts, or RFBs, is causing a lot of buzz.
What we see observationally is there is a bright, very short burst, like milliseconds burst of radio emission from someplace, from something.
Paglione pinpoints their origin. In this case,
It's in this spiral arm, and that's the localized spot of the FRB.
What's most exciting about this signal from outer space is that it repeats itself every 16 days.
They used to be a one-off. There'd just be this burst and then you'd never see it again. And so that made it even more mysterious.
scientists wondered if what they witnessed was even real. But picking up on the pattern changes that.
They were real. We could determine a lot better where they were.
And help eliminate ideas about their
5 kilometres below the surface. And it was found using radar instruments on board the European Space Agency's orbiter, Mars Express. Scientists looked at radar readings from the planet's southern ice cap, which provided ideal conditions.
Ice is a very transparent medium, especially if it's cold and pure to the electromagnetic waves. So it's a good technique to apply to the Martian polar caps, of course. These caps can have some impurities, but definitely the ice is colder than the ice on the Earth.
Mars might be cold and dry now, but we already know, thanks to rovers on its surface and other probes examining it from orbit, that it was once a warm place with plenty of liquid water and lakes. The new study doesn't tell us how deep the reservoir is, so researchers can't say whether what they've found resembles an underground pool or is simply a layer of sludge. But they do believe it's potentially a huge breakthrough.
Liquid water cannot exist on the surface of Mars. It's simply not possible because of the atmospheric pressure on Mars is so incredibly thin. So for water to remain liquid, it has to be buried deep underneath the surface, and it also has to be very, very salty. And that is...
Hours before Malaysia shut its borders, thousands of Malaysian workers who normally commute to work in Singapore every day rushed to leave. Students also formed long lines at bus terminals, as confusion over whether campuses would shut prompted many to try to leave too. Police stations were crowded after people were told they would require permits for interstate travel, only for police to temporarily withdraw the order. Even after the partial lockdown was imposed, social distancing was forgotten as buyers rushed to supermarkets to stock up on essentials.
Coming, rushing and crowding out the area, it's still going to spread. It's still going to spread anyway.
It's really messing up with my spring break. What is there to do here other than go to the bars or the beach?
I mean, it sucks, but we're going to make the best of it.
If I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying. You know, we've been waiting for Miami spring break for a while. The bars and restaurants are closed, but we'll find ways out for it.
We've all heard the call for social distancing, right? Perhaps it wasn't loud enough for some young people who are still converging on the beaches of Florida for spring break. Now, the state governor, what does he say? He says he's not going to shut down beaches amid the outbreak. However, some local authorities are closing beaches to fight the spread of COVID-19.
Kim Kyung-soo took off work as a bus driver to pitch in on what's become the national priority here, defeating COVID-19. Now he's volunteering at this drive-through test clinic.
As citizens, we're here for the safety of our fellow citizens to volunteer for Goyang City.
Anyone can pull in
안녕하세요.
with or without symptoms. This local office worker is here just as a precaution.
마스크는 내리고.
He tells nurses he recently smoked a cigarette with someone who may have been in contact with infected people. After taking his temperature, they say he seems symptom-free for now, but to come back if that changes. Others receive a much more thorough exam based on their physical symptoms and potential exposure to confirmed patients. Thousands of Koreans have driven through this clinic in the past 2 weeks. It's free, takes 10 minutes, and you get results in 2 to 3 days.
Staying sick longer only increases costs and puts people's lives in danger. You must find them quickly, and you must not be frugal about the costs. It's the state's basic duty to support the lives of its people.
More than 200,000 South Koreans have now been tested. Top health officials gathered this week in Seoul to share their results, and they didn't skimp on precautions in a room full of journalists.
With a transparent and open society as the goal, we'll recommend a response system that blends voluntary public participation with creative application of advanced technology.
Text messages alert the public to the location of confirmed cases, and quarantined patients update the government on their health via smartphone app. Seoul has rejected citywide lockdowns and left its borders open to everyone except those coming from the hardest-hit region of China.
The consensus among public health professionals seems to be that travel bans are not effective in containing contagious illnesses and can make things worse, even by fueling a sense of complacency.
Korea's neighbors China and Japan disagree, banning travelers from South Korea's worst affected regions. Despite tougher quarantine measures, Japan is struggling ahead of the prize Summer Olympics. South Korea partly credits mass testing for its relatively low death ratio among hard-hit areas. The country's ratio is less than 1% compared to more than 4% in Iran and 6% in Italy. And today, during a Pentagon video conference, the top U.S. commander in South Korea also credited testing for keeping COVID-19 off U.S. bases, testing initially done by the Koreans.
They've been extraordinary partners. We've typically got our test results turned around in about 24 hours.
One U.S. service member and 8 others connected to the U.S. military here have tested positive. But General Robert Abrams said strict controls and transparency prevented a larger outbreak.
For example, daily live stream community briefings by our garrison and installation commanders with questions and answers, as well as multiple virtual town halls with our senior commanders.
Most Korean cases have been limited to the country's southeast, but recent cluster infections in Seoul may test the Korean model for success.
This testing center was set up specifically for residents and employees of this building where there's been a large outbreak of COVID-19. And as you can see behind me, a gentleman has just sat down. He's beginning the testing procedure. The outbreak here has really concerned this community. A lot of small businesses, cafes, and restaurants have closed down temporarily. And perhaps more concerning is that right along this area runs one of Seoul's most busy metro lines.
Typically, hundreds of thousands of people transfer at Chindorim Station every day. There's now just a trickle during rush hour now that there's been an outbreak up the road. One area in this neighborhood where foot traffic hasn't slowed is outside of pharmacies. The government has limited customers to just 2 masks a week to make sure healthcare workers get what they need first. Still, there's no panic here as people in this community come together to cope.
I'd like to buy more masks, but I know if I did that, others wouldn't be able to. So, I feel I shouldn't.
He says foreigners who don't find masks necessary may have a change of heart as the coronavirus continues its deadly global march. You have to experience it personally, he says, to understand. For the PBS.
Today, a sobering new reality for millions of Americans as many parts of the country are shutting down to try to help slow the spread of the deadly coronavirus.
This is a first. I've never experienced anything like this.
The CDC recommending all events that consist of 50 or more people throughout the U.S. close for the next 8 weeks. The governors of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut collectively deciding to close bars, restaurants, and movie theaters in an attempt to stem the growing number of cases.
There will be no more gatherings of 50 plus people. So if you were hoping to plan a graduation party, you can't do it in the state of New York, you can't go do it in the state of New Jersey, and you can't do it in the state of Connecticut.
Only essential businesses will remain open, such as supermarkets, gas stations, and pharmacies, while all non-essential businesses must close. However, restaurants will be able to offer takeout and delivery.
We want people home. We want less density. We strongly advise this. This is not mandatory, but it is strongly advised. And it's not mandatory at this time. And it may be in the future.
The steps are the latest escalation efforts to enforce social distancing in New York, which now has the most coronavirus cases in the country.
People are really afraid to go to the supermarket. They're afraid to go to the cleaner.
The governor now calling on the federal government to implement nationwide protocols.
It's chaos. I think it actually feeds the feeling that the country's out of control. And there is no clear direction, and there is no clear path. Let the federal government say, these are the guidelines. Here are the guidelines on schools. Here are the guidelines on businesses. Here are the guidelines on travel.
Just 20 minutes north of New York City, this is New Rochelle. New York's governor sealed off the city of 80,000 when more than 100 people contracted coronavirus, the highest cluster anywhere in the U.S. Scenes like out of a science fiction movie. A drive-through testing station for coronavirus. The facility, designed to handle 200 cars a day, has one huge advantage over traditional testing methods, according to the New York's governor.
It's actually safer to keep them in their car so they can come in for the testing. It's less exposure overall.
Back in New York, the city is slowly grinding to a halt. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, which hosts millions of visitors a year, is now closed. For those who rely on the crowds for their livelihoods, like the street vendors out front, it's been terrible. How's business?
There is no business. The museum is shut down, there's no tourists, so we have to tough it out until it's all over.
Have you ever seen business this bad before?
Never.
But it's not just the Met. Dozens of cultural institutions throughout New York City have been affected. The Museum of Natural History, the Whitney Museum, the New York City Opera, and even Carnegie Hall. All are closed because of coronavirus fears.